folks, and welcome to Kelly's Chronicles, my channel where I sit down with people who are living everyday lives and listen to their extraordinary stories hidden behind quiet, normal existences. Because here we believe that those lives are the most important and need to be acknowledged, heard, and celebrated as to not be forgotten by the passage of time. Hope you all had a wonderful week. It's been a little bit crazy over here. We finally got our liquor license, so we're doing really good.
Yay!
I know. It's been we've been celebrating over here. It's been a long time. I know. We finally got our liquor license over here. So we're going to finally open on Friday. We are so excited. We've got a busy week, but even when it's a busy week and we got a lot of stuff going on, we still always find time to do this podcast because this is very important to me and very important to Dad. So even though life is crazy, we always find time to sit down and have our podcast. My husband and I went to Chattanooga for a little bit this weekend and just to get away and have a weekend. And the rest of our crew actually, ironically, all went out of town to enjoy this last hurrah until we're crazy busy. So that is what we did. We went to the Ruby Falls. It was so beautiful. And my husband didn't realize it, but he took me to a Lord of the Rings themed Airbnb, which was really awesome. It was a dwarf caverns and their lair underneath the earth. I had a total fangirl experience. The minute I walked onto the property, I recognized everything. I was like, oh my gosh, this is Lord of the Rings theme. Airbnb. So that's what my husband and I did this weekend, but
Wow.
that's about it for us over here in Alabama.
A
Um,
special treat for you that to go to
I
see the
know.
Lord
It
of
was a
the
big
Rings.
deal.
Yeah. Did they have did they have the whole set or what, or just like a few themed areas in the building and then uh,
Yeah,
okay.
that just more like themed pieces. They had, I mean, a lot of their rendition of what it would look like.
Okay.
They had a wall canvas of the Great Hall. It
Oh.
was really cool.
No, that sounds like fun.
It was a
That
lot of
was
fun.
I mean, a lot of people get into the Lord of the Rings and everything that they had to reproduce to make that movie. I'm sure a lot of it was green screen, but still the bridges over the
Yeah, a lot of it was
and
graphics.
everything, that was all sets. That was sets.
It's
And they
crazy.
and, just it was incredible. Just what
Yeah,
a yeah, that
it was
director
an
was
amazing movie.
incredible. That guy was
Masterpiece.
incredible. He just he
Yeah, Peter
reproduced
Jackson did a
to
great.
the I mean, almost to the T what the book described, and, of
Hmm.
course, I never read the book, but I've talked to
It's
people
very
who have.
close. I read the
I
books.
tried to read the book, I had a copy of it, and, I read about three pages, and it was just to me, it was just boring because it was, like, descriptive
Yeah,
stuff trying to set the scene of where they were at and trying to describe some of the
yeah.
characters and stuff, and I don't wanna read it. Yeah, I guess I'm into Clancy
Sci-fi.
books and stuff where they start out, the first 2 pages, 19 people get killed and, you know,
Yeah,
yeah,
pretty much.
that's
Yeah,
not kinda right there, yeah. Or I like westerns
but
too. Yeah,
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 sci-fi was your sci-fi westerns.
yeah, I like sci-fi. I'm just not into fantasy writing. I'm more into, oh,
Yeah,
and
I've got a taste for fantasy.
fantasy writing is very unique because you have to it's a fantasy, so it's all imagined.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist.
Mhm.
So the author has to make the scene exist in your mind, and it takes some
Yeah.
time. You gotta go through maybe a chapter of setting the scene and show where this is where we're at, these are the characters, and this is what they look like. Get that mental image going. Like a Western, immediately you open the thing up and you know exactly where he's in the
Yeah.
West, you know. You ride the horse, you got the big hat, got the sombrero, and got the six gun on his hip,
Yep.
big iron on his hip, and it is
Yep.
and they're all kind of the same. That genre is almost all the same uh, basic setup, and Doesn't it varies a little bit. Maybe it'd be you're in California, next one you're in New Mexico or something, but it's yeah. Yeah. Louis L'Amour, my man, Louis L'Amour. Louis
Yeah.
L'Amour he said I could write a Western novel in the middle of the San Diego freeway with a typewriter on my knees. I said,
Okay. So
okay.
okay.
Uh, anyway, so we're
But
gonna go back to Vietnam, right?
yes, we're going back to Vietnam. But
Okay.
just a forewarning to everybody that we're talking about war. There's going to be some bloodshed and some gore and there's going to be death and there's going to be some uh, human rights that are violated and that's war. So
Yep.
if you can't handle it, please click off this video. And if you have children in the room, you don't want them to listen to it, please remove them. Just wanted to let everyone know. All right, go ahead and take it away, Dad.
Okay. I want to set the scene. Okay.
Okay.
I was in Beach Jumper Unit 1, which was a naval special warfare unit. We were in the same we under the same command. It was 4 units under the same command. It was SEAL team, underwater demolition team, boat support unit, and beach jumpers were all in naval special warfare. And we were on board ships and everything in Vietnam. Everybody, pretty much all the units over there had representatives on board the amphibious ships. The amphibious ships were a special branch of the Navy, which was specifically designed to put Marines on the beach. Like you say, like D-Day, where that was amphibious ships. If you look at pictures of D-Day, you'll see LSTs. There a bunch of there's probably 50 LSTs involved in D-Day, maybe more, because they could put themselves right up on the beach and unload Marines off the bow doors and
Yeah.
they could
Crazy.
take tanks or trucks or whatever. So the LST was the main component of D-Day for putting the army. Now they had army guys on there. They had some, not very many Marines, but army, just I'd say soldiers, infantry on the beach. And that's when you have an armed enemy on the beach and you got to get people off the ocean into the beach, you use LSTs. And
Okay.
then they've got other material units, all kind of air cushion vehicles and helicopters and everything. But basically, to get the heavy equipment that's required to support the infantry, you have to have LSTs. Okay. Anyway, I'm gone. I wasn't on LST at this. I was on one earlier. Now I'm in beach jumpers. They're not on. We're not on LSTs in beach jumpers. I mean, assigned. We worked with them. As a matter of
Yeah.
fact, you ever see these pictures where they got the Marines coming down the cargo nets into the boats? I did that.
Yeah.
I went out. I did. I went up to Camp Pendleton, and probably early '67, maybe even '68, and went on a training thing and landed on Red Beach and in Camp
Oh,
Pendleton. Working with the Marines, you had to in Vietnam. There were some Marines on the beach in Da Nang and other
okay.
places in northern, but there was also these amphibious ships. They were LPHs. They were designated LPHs, but one of them, or two of them actually, there was a USS Princeton and USS Valley Forge that were 900-foot wooden deck World War II aircraft carriers. They didn't have the catapults. They just would fly them off the deck, and
Oh,
because they were
okay.
yeah, these
We
now we're even planes, very short takeoff and landing. So they would just fly them off the end of the ship. But they would turn the ship. Here's something people don't know is when an aircraft carrier launches aircraft, they turn the ship into the wind. So the relative wind, see that there's actual wind that nature puts out, and there's relative wind that man puts out. So if a guy in an aircraft carrier wants to have some relative wind across the deck, as he turns into the wind and goes real fast, as fast. These aircraft carriers now, they can do like 30 or 40 miles per hour, and this is a 1,000 ship. Well, this is a 900-foot ship, World War II, pretty powerful. They could do probably 25 knots, 25 miles per hour, and they would turn them into the wind and then go as fast as they could, and that would give them relative wind across the flight deck and help them to get airborne. I was on the Bunker Hill for a while. I was also on the Tripoli for a while.
Yeah.
And what they would do is they would go into port somewhere, and sometimes in Japan, sometimes in the States, and they would have a crane lift one of our communication shelters, which was about 12, 15 feet long and about 8 feet wide, and had a complete suite inside, 3 positions of electronic material or units. We had transmitters and receivers for almost any frequency you can think of, and we would have an antenna array on top. We'd store the antennas inside, and we'd bring them out and deploy them on top of the shelter. So all these whip antennas and weird-looking cone-shaped things and spiral things for different frequencies. And we would, and they set this thing on the ship, always behind the island, because that would give us some protection from the relative wind, so it wouldn't blow our antennas off. And
that's a good thing.
that was where some of the guys were deployed, because there was at any given time, there were about 5 teams that were deployed on different Coast Guard, Navy vessels, and also we had guys in Okinawa, we had guys in the Philippines, a couple of 2 or 3 guys, but they were beach jumpers, and we had berthing areas and stuff in Okinawa and in the Philippines, and then we also had people in Vietnam, but they were very, very temporary. There was only a couple of areas where we were permanently assigned in country. We were mainly on float on amphibious ships, and we did have one. We had one unit down. It was called Team, I think Bravo, Team Bravo.
Okay.
And they were down in the Mekong Delta on a raft. Basically, it was a barge anchored out in the Mekong River, right next to a permanent base there. There was I believe, an Army base, and this was off the Army base. And the reason it was there was so we could have one of our communication shelters in the Mekong Delta, and we could monitor radio traffic. And that was part of our basic mission. If somebody had asked what we were doing, we were classified, so we couldn't really tell, oh yeah, we're doing this and that. We had to be very secretive about what we were doing. So we would tell them we were a psychological warfare unit with capabilities in electronic warfare. That was our mission statement. Well, part of the electronic warfare was intercepting traffic between Vietnamese aggressors, the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese Army. They all had walkie-talkies and a lot of Russian, Chinese-made radio transmitters, and we knew what frequencies they were on, so we would intercept their radio traffic, and we could sometimes use get or translators in there, or Vietnamese speaking people, and they could figure out where they were at and what they were doing. So we could actually assist the infantry units that were involved in deployed to that area and tell them where the Viet Cong or the NVA were, and they could go and do operations against them, try to mess with their capabilities. Anyway,
Yeah.
we had a communication shelter on this barge down in the Mekong River, and um, one of our men they had they had a gangway that went from the shore to the barge, and one of our men left the club on the army base and was going to go to the barge, and he never made it. And they found him
Oh.
2 miles downstream, lodged in the roots of a tree. A couple of days later, and he had been he'd been murdered, and we don't know who did it. We had some uh, like clues of it could have been he got into an argument with a seal. There was a seal that was on board or on our barge, and they were down drinking in the club on the army base, and my one of my guys that we ended up dead. I think he may have pissed off this seal, and the seal murdered him. Anyway, never solved that
Mhm.
problem, never solved that case. And about 2 weeks later, the Viet Cong mortared the barge. They set up a mortar tube because mortar is very portable. They can use throw it over your shoulder and go, and then another guy can carry the projectile. And they set up a mortar somewhere and mortared the barge, and a shell went through the roof of the barge and exploded inside the
Okay.
barge. And there were two ETs in there. Two of our electronic technicians were in the shelter at the time, instantly killed, and splattered them all over the inside of the shelter. And they sent me down there. So we need to have that shelter. Go down and see if you can get it running again. And no, I went down there. I went down there, and the door was blown half off, and it was full of flies and maggots.
Mm.
It was awful. All the equipment was just most of it was shattered, blown to pieces, and there were pieces of human being, the flesh all over the inside, and lots of and it was yeah. Needless to say, it was very smelly, and
Yeah.
so I just packed up, and I got on the horn, and I was able to contact my people in Okinawa, and I said, "It's it's hopeless. It's not gonna we're not gonna be able to use this shelter ever again. It's a," and I described what it was like, and he said, and this guy says, talking to this guy and some lieutenant, and he said, "Excuse me, I'll be right back." And he goes in and pukes.
Oh.
Yeah, he gets
Ugh.
off the radio. He gets off the radio, goes back and pukes, and then comes back, and he says, "Well, I feel better now." He says, "Ah, that's horrible." And
Yeah.
so
Mm.
just we'll just write this one off, and we'll get another shelter. We'll put another shelter on an airplane and get it over there. It's because they had a lot of heavy duty, large aircraft that were flying back and forth from Vietnam, taking equipment over and bringing guys out and stuff. So they reserved a spot on probably a C-130. We could get they would these could be put on a C-130, so they probably put it on, or a C-141, which is another big
Mhm.
aircraft, and they could get it over there, and we got another one, and
What would you do with
got
the
it.
old shelter? What would you do with
The
the
old
old
one,
shelter that was
the old shelter was we turned it over to the Army. They had a base there,
okay.
and the Army, no matter where the Army is, they've got a salvage yard. They'll have a yard
Mm,
with all kinds of surplus military equipment, damaged vehicles, all kinds of stuff, and it's kind of over in the back somewhere, and they got it off the barge, and they loaded it. They There was a road there pretty close to where the base was, and they loaded it on a truck, and they took it into the back of the base, and there was some classified equipment on there. That was one thing that the Navy
mhm,
was concerned with. Was There was a KY-3. Uh, it was a encryption equipment, and it was
mhm.
pretty. It was confidential, maybe even secret. But they had little plates that you would put on a. You would get a radio message. It would come in 5 letter groups, so it'd be like A B C D E F, and then you would take your little plate and you set it over that when you got it, you set it over the message, and it would uh, then unscramble it, I guess. And so they had to get those plates out of that shelter, and they had to destroy the KY-3. And so uh, I went to the Army and I said, there was some classified stuff in there. And said, "Oh, we'll take care of it." And what they did is they took it out to a demo pit and they blew it up.
Oh,
They Yeah, they
yeah.
put some heavy duty 5-pound block of C4 in there and detonated it and just blew the thing to pieces. Just be pieces of little tiny pieces of metal
Mhm.
that nobody could really use to do any. And that was in addition to having a mortar round detonated. So there really wasn't much
Yeah,
of,
so it was, like, destroyed and
but
then destroyed.
but I don't think the Army wanted this nasty thing anywhere. They didn't want it. I mean,
Yeah,
I mean, I didn't
forever.
really talk to that was somebody else did all of that. Uh, and because I think they wanted me to go in there and get the KY-3, the little encryption plates. And I
Yeah.
did not set foot in that freaking thing. There's no way,
Mhm.
no freaking way was I going to go in there. And, so
Yeah. No.
anyway, yeah, that's one of the things that I really don't want to remember. I mean,
Mhm.
there's lots of things I wanna remember in my life, and there's some things that I would rather just be shoved into my subconscious and never recalled again. Anyway, yeah, and
Yeah.
okay, let's see, I'm gonna go on to something else. This is too weird. Anyway,
Move on to
okay,
something
now
else, Dad.
one of
It's
the
okay.
things one of the things that we would get involved with is we would work with, since we were all, well, the SEALs were in naval special warfare, and we occasionally would get involved with what the SEALs were doing because
Okay.
they were some bored stiff and just said, "Well, let's go do something. We need to have a job, you know." And so
Yeah.
one of the jobs that they assigned as SEAL, they said, "Okay, SEAL, I don't want you to go into Laos because Laos borders or South Vietnam, North Vietnam. I mean, it's the border between the two countries is probably 500 or 600 miles long or more, and you
Yeah.
could go anywhere on the Vietnamese side of the border between Laos and Vietnam, and that was okay. You just don't cross into Laos. Just stay in Vietnam. Okay, they told the SEAL they want him to go into the one area up in the Central Highlands where the border between Laos and Vietnam was very, fluid, I guess you'd say. There was no I didn't have little signs that say, "You're now entering Laos." But we went
Yeah.
up on the side of the hill, me and this one SEAL went up the side of this hill in Vietnam, and you could look across into Laos, and you could see movement down there. And what it was the Ho Chi Minh Trail. That was a main corridor between North Vietnam and the units of the South, the aggressors, the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong, where they would bring weapons, ammunition, and food, and everything coming down the Ho
Oh
Chi
my
Minh
god.
Trail. And they actually had in parts of the trail, they actually was paved and had trucks rolling down the road, and other parts were a little trail in the jungle that the Vietnamese would take a bicycle and they would put packs on the bicycle. They didn't ride the bicycle; they pushed it with all these
Oh
big packs. Probably several 100 pounds of equipment on this bicycle, and
gosh.
they would push this bicycle hundreds of miles down this little trail. And of course, there's some of it, like I said, were paved highways, but that was in the North Vietnam section. The section off of South Vietnam was normally a jungle trail where these bicycles were going down, and there would be a few vehicles could make it, a Jeep or something like that could go
Mhm,
down this trail. Anyway, we were up there with, we had night vision scopes, call them starlight scopes, and we had a
mhm.
binocular, and we sat up there for a day counting trucks, and we were they were mainly to count trucks because trucks you could see a truck, but it was hard to see a guy pushing a bicycle. So
Yeah.
we counted trucks and went back home. and and I wish I could remember this SEAL's name because he was a hoot. He was a funny guy. And,
Those are the best kinds of
and we
guys, let me
we
tell you.
actually we actually had a good time. I mean, getting there and getting out was lots it was walking in the jungle. They flew us as close as they could get. There was an LZ, a landing zone about, I'll say 5 miles away from where we were at, and we had to go through the jungle to get there and back. And,
Right.
but
And as
this
you
guy
told
was
us, the jungle is scary at night. It's a scary
it's
place at night.
scary all the time. In Vietnam, it's scary all
Oh,
the time. It was
oh,
you could get killed any time of the day or night, you know?
oh, oh, lovely.
And there was another thing is there were snakes all over the
Mhm.
place and tigers.
Never.
There was tigers. As a matter of
Did
fact, they
you
had a
ever
Marine.
encounter a tiger? Did you
No,
ever,
I
like,
didn't,
come across a tiger?
but there was a Marine. This is no kidding. There was a Marine unit attached. There was they had an artillery base out somewhere in it where I was at. There was a Marine base up there in the Central Highlands somewhere, and it's all mountainous, covered with jungle. And his Marines had put a artillery unit out there where they could fire into Laos, and they couldn't go into Laos, they could shoot into it. So anyway, they had this base, and they had this poor old Marine. Him and another Marine were out in this what's called a listening post, which is a guy in a foxhole, basically out in front of the wire, all by himself out there, and his job is to catch any infiltrators that's trying to come in to the base. And he was out there and in the middle of the jungle, and this his partner there with him heard this movement out in the bush, and he didn't shoot. They listened, and all of a sudden, this huge tiger came out of the jungle and grabbed one of the Marines by the head. This animal was 600 pounds, huge mouth,
Oh
grabbed this guy, helmet and all, grabbed him by the head and drug him off into the bush.
oh my
And
gosh.
that was the last time anybody saw him. He was eaten. And, So
Oh,
they're out there. They're out. There was definitely predators out there. It was a jungle, so you're gonna have snakes and tigers and not maybe not always tigers. You're gonna have predators, no matter where you're at. You can be in any jungle in the world, and you'll have predators that are the top of the food chain, and they're out there eat anything
yeah,
they can get their hands on. And those tigers
yeah.
are some of the biggest predators. They're definitely I'm pretty sure they're the biggest cat, and they can they
Yeah,
can
they're definitely one of
they
the
can
biggest ones.
yeah, for them, a human being is like a snack, you know? They wanna really have
Yeah,
a
I mean,
meal or
there have been
kill a water
reports of
buffalo. Yeah,
man-eating
uh,
tigers that only have an appetite for man. I
right.
think in India, there's been reports of tigers that
Oh,
only
yeah.
ate humans. They
Oh,
hunted and
yeah,
killed
and
humans.
then
That's it.
in Africa, they had lions that were, human, predators, man-eaters, and, they had matter of fact, there's a movie made about that, about a lion that had killed 100 people or something and eaten them. Anyway, yeah, so that was just that's part of the fun of being out in the jungle. And there was always
Yeah.
bugs of every kind. And then usually got to go through water because the jungle has lots of streams and lakes and rivers, and that's why it's a jungle. Is it's always wet. And
Yep.
yeah, so it was a fun thing, but I could not remember this seal. We had a good time. I mean, it was because he was an old he was because for me, it was the first time I'd ever been in, you know, uh, doing
The jungle.
I'd been out with the Marines, and the Marines is totally different. They're usually company-sized patrols, and they're smoking and talking and they all got right guard, brute, and cigarettes. The Vietnamese could hear them coming, like, a mile or 2 away. They knew where they were. It was in retrospect, it was absolutely stupid way to run a guerrilla warfare, but that was what we did. That was what the military only had one way of doing things, and for Vietnam, it was the wrong way. And,
Mhm.
they would go out there, and the Vietnamese would hear them coming, they'd set up ambushes, wipe out a few Marines, and that's all they got. They kill one Marine a day, then they were happy. And yeah, it was crazy. But working with the SEALs, these guys we call them snake eaters because they would go out in the jungle and that was their home. They lived out there and they knew what to eat, what not to
Mhm.
eat, and they were experienced guerrilla jungle fighting guys. And
Wow.
so, like I said, I went out with the Marines, but that was totally different. This was just very covert operations with this guy. And
Yeah.
anyway, that was one thing we did. We work with the SEALs occasionally, and
Mhm.
uh, yeah. So
Would you
anyway,
have preferred to work with the SEALs or to work with the Marines? Which one would you have preferred to work with?
oh, absolutely, I would prefer to work with the SEALs because they were more
Mm.
professional, but the Marines like I said, a different type of thing, and they were doing a different type of operation, and they didn't care if the Vietnamese seen them or not.
Oh,
They were
wow.
coming. They were Marines, and they were gonna
And they
go
were
to
gone.
from point A to point B. Whatever was at the end of the road was gonna get messed up, and they were I always saw rude, crude, and unrefined. Yeah, that's Marines
So
they're a special breed, but you have to understand the Marines, their basic mission, you don't send the Marines in to do what they were doing in Vietnam. That I'm saying that they did not utilize the military the way they should have been utilized. They were out of their environment. They were doing things they should not have been doing. And because the Marines are normally the point of the spear. If you want to take over an area, a country, or a certain island or whatever, you send in the Marines. They go in. They're like I was talking about the amphibious assault with the LST. Go in, and they don't even use LST. They come in. take a LPH, a landing, which is a landing platform helicopter. They'll put an LPH off the shore, and they'll fly the Marines in. But they go in first. It's not the Army; it's the Marines. They go in first, and the Army is more big units, divisions, and armies that go in and take large swaths of land. The Marines are just they're there to establish the beachhead, and then everybody comes in behind them after they've established the beachhead. And they're in Vietnam in jungle warfare. Where's the freaking beachhead? You know,
Yeah.
it was stupid. They should have never used the Marines like that. And they were just not in their element. And they, for one thing, is when they were up on the area of Vietnam that's adjacent to the demilitarized zone, which is demilitarized zone is about a 5-mile wide strip of land separating North Vietnam from South Vietnam. They have the same thing in Korea. They have a demilitarized zone in Korea. They have a demilitarized zone in Cyprus in the Mediterranean. They have a demilitarized zone in North Ireland, where
Oh.
it's a strip of land separating the two people who don't get along very well. And
Keep them separated.
and right adjacent to the demilitarized zone, they sent Marines in there again, out of their freaking element, go in there and establish a base like 10 miles from DMZ. Well, the North Vietnamese knew that the Marines were there. So they brought in 175 millimeter long range artillery pieces and set them up just across the demilitarized zone. And these guns could fire about 17 miles, sometimes 20 miles, according to what type of ammunition they're using. And they were firing across the DMZ into this Marine base. And there was two. There was Con 10 and what was the other one? Quezon. Okay, and he was two Marine bases right on the DMZ, and they were getting shelled day and night. And I'm going, what the F are you idiots doing? You're in this freaking hole in the ground, and they're firing 175 rounds at you that leave a crater you could lose a Volkswagen in. You people are nuts. You talk to Marines that were in Vietnam, that were in Con 10 or Quezon, they're going, yeah, it was hell. We just had these little trenches, and these shells are coming. Because the Marines, again, Marines are not engineers. They don't know how to build a bunker. They don't know how to fortify a position. That's for the Army engineers to do. There are Marine engineers, but they're build a little bridge or something. But building a bunker that can withstand a 175 millimeter round, you better bring in the frickin' Corps of Engineers. And they'll pour concrete, and they'll put up a substantial underground bunker that can withstand shelling. But these Marines had nothing like that. They were like putting up a few sandbags and throwing a log up or something, and they were getting their butts kicked. And
Dang. That's crazy.
I was born in the Marines. My dad was a Marine reservist when I was born, and he got called up in Korea. I love the Marines. It's a great service, but they're oftentimes not used the way they should be. They're put into areas and put into assignments that's not Marines shouldn't be doing that. That should be the Army or somebody else, not the Marines. Just like in Beirut, and was it probably about 1985, somewhere right in there, and they put a bunch of Marines in a building in Beirut, and a truckload of explosive went and blew the friggin' building up, killed 100 150 Marines or something that were in this build. What the hell are they doing in a building in a war zone? Get the Marines out of there. You want a
Yeah.
Marine to do his job, give him a freaking rifle and tell him to go take that, take that hill or something. That's what
Yeah.
they're
Like the
trained to do.
building.
You're not trained to
Yeah.
sit in a building in a war zone, get blown up. That's one good thing about our administration now is they have professional military people running things. They have adults
They
running
do.
military people. The adults in the room. Vietnam was. And I'll tell you right now, Vietnam was a mistake, and it cost 58,000 good men their lives. When you go to high school somewhere, you look at the senior class, they're all a bunch of teenagers, and they're young and they're in the prime of life and ready to go out in the world and take on the world. And when you send him to some hellhole like Vietnam and get him killed off at 18, 19, 20 years old, all of that potential is gone. And that was 58,000 potentials gone. And a lot of my friends, that's just a big mistake. We should have never, ever got involved in that. And even we were warned. We were warned. MacArthur warned us. He said, never get involved in a land war in Asia, because he knew that the Asian population was a huge population. And they were the leadership in Asia was not afraid to sacrifice a couple 100,000 people, million people. And that was nothing. They didn't care. They had another couple million in waiting, and all of those countries over there, practically every one is a dictatorship. And so when they have a war, when they have a conflict, they send human waves in there. And the dictator will tell the generals running the army, you will take that town. I don't care how many men you get killed. Take it. And that's how they fight. They fight this masses of people against, they don't care that they get killed. It's not, they don't lose a minute of sleep
Yeah.
over it. And that's why you don't get involved in a land war in Asia, because there's just swarms of people, millions of people that will die for their boss, their dictator. It's terrible.
Very much so.
We should have never, ever, ever got over there. Now we should have, there's ways we could have supported the South Vietnamese government without actually putting our men in there, boots on the ground. But once we said, "Oh, we'll handle this," you don't have South Vietnam. They had an army, but we said, "No, that's okay. You guys just stay in your base and we'll handle this." Yeah, see what happened.
Mm-hmm. Man.
And I'm not saying that we should have ignored Vietnam and let them become communists. But then you have to. What they should have done, in my opinion, is they should have went and had a national referendum. And they should have taken the South Vietnamese army, went around to all the polling stations in Vietnam, and then had an election without interference from the Viet Cong or the North Vietnamese. Had an election and said 2 questions: do you want to be a democracy or do you want to be a communist country? And I think, and it also had an adjunct on there. If you're a communist country, this is what it's going to be like. If you're a democracy, this is what it's going to be like. And I'll bet you that 99% of the South Vietnamese population would have said, "Oh yeah, I want to be in a dictatorship, a communist dictatorship," because guess what? You're in a communist dictatorship. You don't have to worry about anything. The government takes care of everything for you. You don't have any freedom.
At a price.
Yeah.
At a very high cost.
That's exactly the way the Vietnamese think. They have groupthink. They want to do what
Oh, okay.
everybody else is doing. If everybody else wants
That
to
makes sense.
do something, and they wanna go do that. They wanna be part of the crowd. They don't really think very much as individuals. They're more, what is the village doing? What's the town doing? What's the city doing, and what's the country doing?
Yeah.
That's what I want to do. I don't wanna be alone out here, some kinda weirdo, not being part of the crowd. I wanna be part of the crowd.
Yeah.
And they would've
Yeah, I can
and
understand
now
that.
now guess what? North Vietnam took over South Vietnam, and yeah, they had some bloodshed there. The North Vietnamese got rid of any individual thinkers like priests and doctors and politicians and generals. They all got killed off. But the rest of the army and everything went to relocation to re-education camps, and they were indoctrinated in the communist doctrine and released out into society. And now Vietnam is a very prosperous country. Um, it's still a military. It's still a dictatorship. Still has, you don't have free elections. I think they have elections, but they only have one candidate. But Vietnamese are doing just fine, and
Fair.
they're a great ally against the Chinese now because they hate the Chinese. The Chinese ran Vietnam for 700 years. They came down and occupied Vietnam and well, actually all of Indochina, which is Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. And that became a Chinese colony, and they ran things. They wouldn't let the kings, and all of the, because they have a royalty in Vietnam. They have a king and a queen and all of the court and everything. They have a palace in Hue. They had a big palace in Hue. They had their own royalty, their own government. But the Chinese came in and took over and wouldn't let them do anything. And they got finally kicked Chinese out. Not sure all the
Get it.
particulars of how they did that, but they
Yeah.
finally became an independent country. And then guess what? As soon as that happened, the freaking French came in there and colonized them again.
Heck.
And so
You can't catch a break.
they don't like the French either. And
Yeah.
so yeah, you have to understand the Vietnamese. When we got into Vietnam, the Vietnamese have been fighting foreign aggressors and foreign occupiers for hundreds of years, and they were good soldiers. The
Yeah.
Vietnamese, they were, as far as the military goes, whether it was North or South Vietnam, they were pretty good fighters. The South Vietnamese had a little problem because they didn't believe in their government. They didn't think that their government was in working in their favor. Whereas the North Vietnamese, they had Ho Chi Minh and General Giap, which was probably General Giap was probably one of the best military leaders in the history of the world. He was a genius. And Ho Chi Minh, he was a freedom fighter. He was a communist freedom fighter, but he was able to unite his people and tell them that the best way to win, or the best way to run Vietnam was with communism. And he was right. I think the Oriental people really respond to a dictatorship because, like I said
Mm.
before, they want to be part of. They wanted to be part of the crowd. They want. They want to. They don't want. They not so much do they want to be free, but they want to be part of something bigger. The Japanese are
Like
a
united.
perfect example. Yeah, the
Mhm.
Japanese, they've got this society. The individual is suppressed. Groupthink. It's like you're part of the group, and you go run your daily lives as part of a team, a group, and you're everything about the whole society, the whole country is set up with that group think where everybody does works for a common goal. America is all this individualism and everybody's doing their
Very
own
individual
thing
thinking.
and
Yeah.
but but yeah, but if
It's
somebody attacks
I
us
like
now, look out, we're gonna kick
oh,
your
yeah,
butt.
we'll be
'Cause then guess
mad at
what?
that.
A group thing kicks in. That's
Yeah.
what patriotism's all about, is about everybody thinking the same way about their country. The American flag and Uncle Sam and all and everything that has to do with American patriotism kicks in when somebody tries to change our way of doing things, and groupthink kicks in, patriotism kicks in, and we go to war. And when we do
Right.
that, because what it is, it's a bunch of individual thinkers that give up most of their individualism to become part of a team, part of that group patriotism. But then if they get isolated, this is what makes an American soldier or sailor, whichever, unique amongst probably any other nation, is because we're just a bunch of individuals. But isolate one guy and he's in a situation where he has to work alone, then that individualism kicks in and he becomes the individual warrior. And he doesn't have to have a sergeant or a colonel or something telling him what to do. He knows what he has to
Does
do
it?
because even all of his training and everything is all groupthink. But when the chips are down, then he can draw on that individual courage and strength of being an individual in a free society. And you don't mess with those people. I mean, it's like the Japanese. There's this one general says, "We want to invade America, and we'll start with California, work our way across." And this other general says, "Hey, you know what you're talking about, man?" He says, "America, there's a gun behind every blade of grass. That you won't get 10 feet in there. And there'll be 5 million crazy patriots coming out of the
5 million
hill
done
to
one
kill
day.
you and everybody else." Yeah, so they
Yep.
definitely rejected that idea right away. They didn't want to face a heavily armed populace. That's not the way to win the war.
Not smart.
You want to
No.
win your war against a bunch of unarmed peasants that you can
Yeah,
mess with an individual
exactly.
patriot. Boy, they're yeah.
You're forced to be reckoned with. A force to be reckoned with.
But
That's a good little
yeah,
end to our video today. Happy Memorial Day. Remember all our fallen veterans and to remember those that have served this country. So
yeah. We had a
it's
real good Memorial Day thing here. We went up to
yeah.
'cause I'm the American Legion now, but we went up to Chesterfield at the Mormon ghost town up there, and we had
Oh
a there
yeah.
was God, there was hundreds of people up there. Every Memorial Day is a big deal, and they had
Oh yeah.
hundreds of people up there, and we did a little flag ceremony and a gun salute
Oh,
and
yeah.
a prayer for the military that died in the wars, and then we
Yeah.
went to downtown Lava, and they got a little park down there, and we did the same thing there. We had a gun salute, a prayer, and I said the prayer, and there was about, I would say, probably 75 Harley Davidson motorcycles that rode. They came from Downey. They came from Downey. They had a parade in Downey, and they came to Lava, and they went up and down the main street.
Oh, that's
And it
awesome.
was they call it rolling thunder, and I'm telling you, those guys shake
Yeah.
the ground. And
That's
they,
awesome.
they had flags. They had flags of all the services. They had American flags, and they were rolling along. The guy was holding the flag, and the flag was trailing out behind him. And it was pretty impressive. And
That's cool.
yeah, and then they participated. They parked their motorcycles, turned their motorcycles off, and then we had the prayer service and the gun salute, all that, and then they got back on their bikes and started them back up again and rolled off to the next. I think they went to Preston after they were done
Yeah.
here. They went to Preston and had the parade up there, and it was pretty. That Rolling Thunder, that's they do that like they had a World War II monument dedicated in D.C. and they brought in like about 1,000 Harley Davidsons.
Nice.
Yeah. Anyway,
Well,
we're we're about we're about at quitting time
we
here,
are,
and
yeah, we're out of
and I
time. I got,
yeah, yeah.
what were you gonna
I,
say?
I like Yeah, well, I was just gonna say that I'm definitely not done with Vietnam.
We have
Uh,
years,
yeah, a
Dad,
little bit
years
more.
that we can talk
Good.
about Vietnam.
Yeah,
So,
we'll have to
but
pick it up again next week.
yep, but let's go ahead and finish up. And we want to thank everybody for joining us today. Please like, comment, share with your family and friends, and subscribe if you can. Be safe out there, please, out on the roadways as you travel and whatnot. And we will see you next week.